Chapter 180. The bronze golem stood still on the ground, seemingly waiting for its wound to heal. The loss of its right arm would disrupt its balance and greatly affect its combat abilities. Seeing this, the tiger also stood still, wanting to monitor the effectiveness of his dark matter's corrosive ability, to see whether his corrosion skill was stronger or the bronze golem's healing ability. The purple tiger revealed a cunning smile. Hee. Finally the bronze golem could not recover. This problem seemed to have been solved. The white tiger on this side began to go all out, his mouth wide open and his third eye also wide open, simultaneously gathering spiritual power, then firing two powerful attacks at the same time. The main target was the left shoulder of the black diamond golem. The spiritual power beam from the third eye acted like a drill bit, while the attack fired from the white tiger's mouth was like a drill providing the driving force, successfully blowing away a large chunk of the black diamond golem's body. The white tiger slowly advanced, while the other golem staggered back, creating a rumbling sound on the ground. Both kings of the Iron Realm had been defeated. It was time to collect them. Two monsters in the dark cave saw this scene. One shouted, "They won!" But the other, still sweating, quickly stopped him. "Not yet!" Because that bizarre scene was still happening, even though the two golems had been defeated. The swarm of metal bugs were still fighting desperately against the invaders. Not only that, the number of awakened metals was increasing, vast and rolling like a tide, rushing towards the Mist Mountain beast and attacking crazily. The lizard-like monster voiced his suspicion. Perhaps the one commanding this swarm of metal bugs is not the two golems, but something deeper. At this moment, deep underground, a bizarre eye opened, like a three-tiered lamp, emitting a dazzling light. But the lizard man saw that both sides were now mutually wounded, both suffering significant losses. It was the perfect time to swoop in and feast on the spoils. Their goal was to capture the bronze golem alive, using spatial tunneling techniques to transport it to another continent. The spider demon, upon hearing this, clapped its hands in approval. "Oh wow, this idea isn't bad, let's proceed." However, a firm voice suddenly echoed from behind them. "Well then, you guys better be determined to carry it out." It was Ching Chang, the Earthman, who had been lurking here for a long time. The Earthmen in this battle served as the rear guard for the Misty Mountain army, because in all previous battles, they had been caught off guard too many times, hadn't they? Ching Chang raised his left hand, and the earth suddenly sprouted towering thorns, tens of meters high, tightly wrapping around the bodies of these two oddities, tightly restraining them. But these thorns seemed to be made of steel. The two oddities were dumbfounded, not understanding what was happening. The muscles and bones in their bodies were being squeezed so tightly they couldn't breathe, the pain piercing their hearts and livers. They could only gasp out one sentence: "This is bad." Ching Chang's face was as cold as ice. These two stinking ants also dared to lurk here wanting to feast on the spoils? He locked the two oddities tightly, the sound of breaking bones still continuously echoing. Like this, the rear was safe. Now they just had to wait for the white tiger team. On this side, the mutant tiger army roared loudly, because the ground was shaking violently. They felt something strange and terrifying was about to happen. Indeed, just 1 second later, the metallic ground suddenly cracked, bulging up large chunks, as if something underneath was fiercely surfacing. Ching Chang saw this scene, completely shocked. Even the metal mountain was split and collapsed. Then, a bizarrely huge figure truly surfaced, its body covered in hot, lava-like orange veins. It slowly appeared behind the two golem kings, its body getting bigger and bigger, more and more gigantic. No one knew how tall it was, only knowing that it hadn't finished emerging. Little Lamb looked at this supergiant monster in horror. It was so overwhelming, thinking they had won. But a final boss appeared. This boss monster had a body of black and golden brown, with veins of molten lava running chaotically across its body. It looked nothing less than a massive block of scorching lava, only it was alive. Comparatively, its body was 100 times larger than the two golems, truly a disaster-level beast. The white tigers could only look up, and even if their eyesight wasn't good, they couldn't see its face clearly because it was too high. The final boss, with its grotesque face, began to roar in intimidation, the deafening sound echoing and shaking the entire sky. The lizard man, seeing this scene, cursed loudly, "The ancestral shit has awakened." Of course, this was the progenitor of metal, the one who held the highest authority over metal. But Ching Chang, who was inherently honest, thought this guy was indeed the progenitor of shit, his face completely dumbfounded, as if he had fallen into a stupor. My God, is there such a big piece of shit in this world? Don't joke, how can it be like this? If that's the truth, the person who excreted this piece of shit must be the progenitor of the Titans, and I must be severely constipated. The lava monster faced the invaders and roared loudly, officially declaring war on them. The white tiger and purple tiger didn't say much. They simultaneously rushed up, one from above and one from below, jointly launching their spiritual power towards the lava monster. The main target was its heart, but unfortunately, this attack was deflected elsewhere, clearly unable to penetrate its body. Not even a scratch could be made. Only 2 small plumes of smoke rose up. The 2 tigers were startled when they saw this, their eyes bulging and their mouths wide open. How are they supposed to fight this? Little Lamb's face was ashen, because she realized the level difference between this creature and them was too great. There was absolutely no chance of winning, even if she could find its heart within its body. But they couldn't even scratch its skin a bit. Then what's the point of finding its heart? At this moment, the massive mouth of the lava monster began to open wide like a volcano, from which a scorching golden orb continuously spun and screamed. Little Lamb turned around and shouted, "Everyone, retreat!" But would it be in time? In the next second, a gigantic dazzling golden energy beam descended. The white tiger and purple tiger could only stare blankly. The golden light streaked across the ground, like a giant saw cutting deep into the earth. Below, millions of fighting monsters, including a majority of metal beetles, had turned into smoke, leaving behind on the ground a straight deep trench, hundreds of meters deep. The dazed porcupine stood at the edge of this trench, looking down and not seeing the bottom, its whole body shivering, dumbfounded and not understanding what happened. The mutant spider on this side had already collapsed on the ground, in the posture of a soldier who had just survived an Air Force bombing, sweat pouring out and soaking its pants. It lamented, "Can we still win?" But the white tiger and purple tiger still bravely charged forward. As long as they didn't die, the task of defeating this giant monster was still theirs and no one else's. Now Little Lamb began her strategy. To drain its spiritual power, she shouted loudly, "Everyone, don't be afraid. Let's drain its spiritual power. If it doesn't have spiritual power, it's just a pile of scrap metal." Saying so, in fact, they themselves were also probing, because they knew nothing about the power of this guy, as well as how many divine powers it had besides its terrifying spiritual power. This was not much different from seeking death. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out, "All right, you guys retreat." Little Lamb turned around in surprise. It was the owner. The towering divine tree in the form of a giant tree man was advancing from behind them. It seemed that the divine tree was also itching for action. It had been observing the entire battle process for a long time. It must be said that the Misty Mountain had made considerable progress, both in strength and tactics. But well, this time it was considered to let the divine tree practice a bit. Hee. I'm here. End of chapter 180.